You've probably seen this before. Two certified B Corps, similar size, maybe even in the same industry. One feels authentic, like the values are truly lived. The other feels more forced. Same certification, very different reality. Why is that? At Lyft Economy, that question led us to create a free tool called the B Corp Values Assessment. It uses a 200-point scale inspired by B Lab's original scoring framework to help you quickly reflect on how deeply your company actually embodies B Corp values across leadership, culture, and day-to-day decisions. Check it out for free at lyfteconomy.com/values. And now, let's get into today's episode of Beyond the B.
Welcome to Beyond the B, an ongoing dialogue about the past, present, and future of the B Corp movement. Co-hosts Emmy Allison and Ryan Honeyman facilitate an open and honest conversation about the B Corp movement, advise companies on how to increase their impact, and provide a deep dive into the new B Corp standards that are shaping our community.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Honeyman. I'm partner at Lyft Economy, and I'm joined once again by my colleague, Emmy Allison. Hey, Emmy.
Hi.
And we are here to do a review and recap episode of 2025. And honestly, it could just be review and recap of our entire podcast, because I don't know if we've had one of those before, like a meta level discussion.
Yeah. It's been well over a year now.
Yeah.
Which is a fun milestone.
Yeah. And so we developed some questions to ask each other. We're going to talk about the Beyond the B podcast, some reflections, also some reflections on the B Corp movement, like what's happened in the last year, tensions, standards, power, and then looking forward, like what we're looking forward to in the next year, 2026. Anything to add on that, Emmy?
I do not have anything to add. Let's jump in. When we started this podcast, what did we most hope that this podcast would do?
Yeah, I think when we first started, there were a couple things we wanted to talk about. We were feeling frustrated in some ways about, because I think the conversations about starting this were like 2023, and we started in 2024. And so, I think part of the thoughts were like, hey, some things are happening in the B Corp movement that we're feeling frustrated about. Things like, it feels like there's different standards or like different verification processes between different analysts. It felt like, there wasn't a clear leader of the movement, and like we needed more leadership, which, sidebar is B Lab hiring for a new CEO. B Lab. And did you notice it says it's not B Lab Global, it just says B Lab. And so that's interesting because I think that's part of the network restructuring. But yeah, there were the new standards coming out, Nespresso and multinationals. Nespresso had been certified, but others were looking at the B Corp community, and, we were having some back channel conversations with folks like David Bronner and some of the other folks around things they were concerned about in the B Corp world. So I think part of the initial goal of the podcast was like, let's have these hard conversations in public and not just, talk about it just to our friends on the side, but really have a place where we're not trying to tear down the movement, but also not avoid the difficult conversations and, have a place to talk about the new standards. So then did we do that? I think for me, this podcast has been a great outlet to like have some of those tough conversations. I would definitely say we haven't touched all of the controversial or tension related things but, we talked about, we had conversations about, Aaron Sahan had some great episodes about like, is the B Corp community even making a difference? And like, are we really social enterprises if we're still maximizing profit while doing some good things? So we got into some of those conversations. We did talk about the Dr. Bronner's exit. We interviewed Nespresso. We talked about, the sort of wokeness debate or like DEI and like, how are we continuing to center that in the community while there's different evolving international conversations. And, we did an episode with Kaylee Gibson on the standards process and the like black box of verification, like what's behind the scenes. So I think we talked about a ton of really interesting things from my perspective, but I'm curious for you, Emmy, do you feel like, did we do what we said we would do, and how has it been for you?
Yeah, I think if I had to choose one sort of key motivation or key motivator for starting the podcast, it was like those conversations that we're having on the margins is like bringing them forward to really create an opportunity to be able to like discuss and process and hold together as a community. There's so many nuances to this movement, and I think sort of like shedding some light to some previously sort of more dark conversations. I think I have said before on previous episodes that I really, it's like really important to me as someone who has been a part of multiple facets of this movement to like, for these episodes to be stimulating like constructive feedback as opposed to just like, complaining about things all the time. And I think that this podcast has created a unique opportunity for like community members to be heard and for like some trends to be seen amongst community members where folks are sort of like struggling more than previously anticipated or the data was showing. So it's sort of that like qualitative versus quantitative conversations. And I think we did succeed. I really so appreciate all the guests that we had on to speak about all these different topics. We really have been able to discuss so many interesting and key, again, facets of the movement that I just am so grateful that the podcast it seems like a reflection of what the community is feeling and sort of like what we're struggling with and what we are excited about.
Yeah. I will say for me, I'm curious your thoughts on this, is that I feel like it's harder and requires a certain level of mental presence to hold the space of, I'm not going to complain or like tear this thing down, because it's so easy to feel like, oh man, I'm just pissed today. Let's just like say all these things that I'm feeling.
I've certainly been tempted.
Yeah. Maybe we've said them and they haven't made the final cut for some of the episodes.
Maybe our editors are very prudent.
Yeah. I think it's one of the areas of access or insight that we have that we hope to be able to share is we often know a lot of the folks at B Lab who are working really hard behind the scenes to like make it work, and they're really committed and dedicated. And it's often not any one person's fault. It's capitalism, or it's just change management processes are hard, or it's just hard to communicate across a growing organization with 10,000 members. And, the B Lab itself is 500 people or less. Don't quote me on that number, but I feel like at one point I thought it was around 500 people. So we sort of know the companies. We work with a lot of those companies. We are B Corps. We're B Corp ourselves, and we know the people at B Lab. And so we can kind of see all the sides. And so it gives us a little more insight to have that grace, but it still can be easy, or, sometimes I just want to lapse into like, oh man, this is really annoying. Why did this happen? So that's all I got on that one, to me.
As someone who has 4 open reviews right now, there's a lot of temptation going on for version 1.6 standards. But we're going to keep it moving.
Keep it moving. Yes. Well, where do you think we fell short, if anything, with this podcast? to date?
I think hindsight is 2020, and I do think too the new standards have been evolving this whole year. And yeah, as we come up on the end of 2025, I'm wishing that maybe we had some more like hands-on strategies or like better tools to recommend or something along those lines for the new standards. Our new standards episodes are quite technical, but there's obviously a lot of room for that in 2026. But yeah, I also think that when it comes to topics of equity and inclusion, we still like have a really long way to go in the movement in terms of representation. That could be literally its own podcast, and I don't think we could ever speak enough about it. But I do think that we did our darndest this year and trying to like include different voices and hear different perspectives. Yeah, I think maybe.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I think we did a good balance there. I think other ways we may have fell short. I mean, part of me wishes that we had more. It's no one's fault, but I do feel like if there were a way for B Lab, especially as it relates to standards changes, to, they probably do this with certain companies, so it just may be that I'm not aware of it. But like, hey, we're thinking of rolling out this change that's like, maybe pushes the deadline back a few months, and like, it would be great if this podcast it was like a resource for them to say like, how do you think people would react? Or like, what's your take on that before certain changes are rolled out? Because we could probably tell you, with good insight as like, oh, this probably will land this way, and maybe you should do it like that. So I guess it's like a falling short in that I'm not sure we've had the operational influence on the rollout of the standards that maybe was never possible and maybe is like unrealistic, but I think was maybe a hope in this podcast was like, this could be a better resource for B Lab to like help them test things or roll things out without it sort of like being shocking or surprising to people. Does that sound reasonable to you, Amy?
Yeah, I do think there are certain communities within the community, like the B consultants, that B Lab could probably have a better, more established relationship. And then there's like a more active feedback loop, because B Lab has spent a great deal of time and energy asking for our feedback for the new standards. It's that data point of something like 10,000 points of feedback or something like that. But this forum, alongside others, does provide an opportunity for a bit more of a active and shorter form, like shorter cycle feedback opportunities for sort of gauging the community's reactions and or like, just like informing folks of things that they would find helpful in their B Corp journey, and especially with the new standards rollout. So yeah, it's like, and I also get it.
Yeah, I guess another thing that I've noticed for myself, and maybe, again, curious how this feels for you, but when we started this podcast, I actually was like, I don't really care to reach a large audience. It's like a very niche podcast. And like, I just want to reach the other people that we care about. And I think that's still the same now. But interestingly, when I think, more vulnerably about where we've fallen short, I think we have a committed, amazing group of listeners, but it doesn't really scale. It's not like a huge audience, right? And so one maybe way, and actually don't know if it's the purpose of this podcast. Maybe that's more like what B Lab's podcasts do, where it's more like Forces for Good, or, maybe it's the US Can podcasts, Let's Get Down to Business, where it's more like bringing in new people to like introduce them to the B Corp movement and like grow the movement. This is more of like a sort of like you already understand kind of what's going on and like you want to go deeper type. This is like for the experts and the nerds. And so maybe the part of me is feeling tension of like, oh, well, maybe we're like not growing as much interest, but I don't know. That just comes up for me too.
I think it's natural to want to like reach more people. And I do think that there are opportunities within the movement. I found it kind of funny that I went to like a B Corp thing relatively recently and no one knew who I was. I was like, whoa, this is fun. But they're like, oh, Beyond the Bee, that sounds cool. I'm going to follow that podcast. So I think there's still opportunities within the movement. But yeah, I do really appreciate our targeting the community and like the folks who really think about these topics a lot. Like if not every day, then at least on a regular basis.
It's like the Bee consultants, the Bee network leaders, and Bee lab staff.
I think so. Bee champions.
The academics. Yeah, the Bee internal champions.
Yeah. If you have any other target audiences and the listeners, send them our way.
Yeah. I mean, you just brought up another thing that I think we've probably fallen short on, which is the audience engagement. So we did start off pretty solid on audience engagement and reaching out to people and like asking for feedback. And then I think we kind of got into a rhythm of here's the episodes we want to do because we've gotten a lot of feedback. And I'd say we probably haven't done a great job since then of really sort of being more thoughtful. Because I think with most podcasts or with anything, if you have any feedback or any thoughts, like email us at beyond@lifteconomy.com. People are just like, I'm not going to email you. But if it's like, hey, we're looking for 2 people to give us thoughts specifically on the governance, like the new government affairs, and like what 2 actions are your company going to take? You know, that kind of specificity, I think we'd get more engagement. And so maybe I'm in real time pledging us to do a better job in 2026 with this new year of like really reaching out and getting more of a sense of what the audience is struggling with and get their feedback.
I'm really excited about that. Yeah. The more like, involvement we can get from stakeholders, I think the stronger and better the podcast can be. And also it like makes me think of those radio shows where like the radio host will be like, next week's episode, we'll be talking about this. So call us and leave us a voicemail.
Oh,
and
yeah.
we might like share your little like blurb. So I would imagine there's like opportunities I was about to be like, send me a voice note. But then I am like, oh gosh, my text message inbox would just like be inundated. Maybe just like warn me that it's a Beyond the Bee voice note.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, it is something we can look into. Is there are some tools like where it's like sort of a fan engagement. Like we had a texting capability early on in the podcast, which was like text the show. But then we found people weren't really using, there was an initial burst when we did it, and then people weren't really using it that much. So we stopped. We actually took down the texting capability, but maybe one funny quirk of the texting thing that at least Buzzsprout, our host, does is that you can text the show. It says like, send a message to the show, and it will send a message to us, but it won't say like who it was from or like have any follow-up number. So that it's sort of like one way, like you can just like send us a note, but maybe we need to make some tweaks of like, send us a note and like leave your number or email if you want a response, because otherwise it just becomes one way. Which
is fun too, that like you could submit an anonymous tip.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I think there's some opportunities there.
Yeah.
Ryan, what were some of your favorite episodes, and maybe some of the most impactful episodes or more controversial episodes? Any like definitely like episodes that first come to mind or top of mind?
Yeah. So I think before we even started this podcast, one of the articles that led us to starting it was, I think it was like a Wall Street Journal article. Oh, no, it was a Financial Times article called Struggle for the Soul of the B Corp Movement. and featured like Aaron Sahan and others saying like the B Corp community is kind of drifted, it's lost its mojo, blah, blah, blah. And, which was fair critique in some ways. And so I think that episode, which is around, I think we called it Struggle for the Soul of the B Corp Movement. And I'm just looking at our top episodes of all time list, and it's number 2.
Yeah.
Number 1 is Thoughts on Dr. Bronner's Decertifying as a B Corp. Interesting.
Definitely the more controversial.
What's interesting though, Emmy, is like the top 5 are all separated by only 15 downloads. So we've got Thoughts on Dr. Bronner's Decertifying as a B Corp, which has 636 listens. Then we have Struggle for the Soul of the B Corp Movement with Aaron Sahan, 631. Then we have our intro to Beyond the B, that's episode 1, 629. Then we've got Nespresso's Side of the Story with Lucy Bai, 627 episodes. And then Patagonia's Take on the B Corp Movement with Vincent Stanley, 621. So yeah, between 5th and 1st, there's only 15 downloads. So a lot of those are my favorite episodes. And I think I've mentioned on before the Kaylee Gibson one on the sort of black box of verification was just like, it helps me understand so much more behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. But what about you? Did you have favorites or ones that you felt?
I was going to say those are very interesting top most listened to episodes because it really follows the trend of like controversial things. Like in the media, getting more impressions and reads and listens and all that jazz. So I guess we're not immune to that. But I think the 3-part series that we had with Nathan and Annie and Raj were some of the more stressful episodes for me, but also I think some of the more powerful ones. And I think we set out to sort of like demonstrate the nuance of equity inclusion in the movement and how it manifests, but we ended up really digging deep on like, what does it really mean to be a B Corp and like how the standard, I think it was one of the most like interesting translation of standards to actual impact and like operations and how these things happen in the business day to day, week to week and year to year. So yeah, it was a really cool series. And I also appreciate Ben Marine coming on to speak about trans issues and like how we speak about them in the community, in the B Corp community. I just have been like so grateful that folks could come on and provide their perspectives, their expertise, and maybe like ask some really important questions back to the movement.
Yeah, there were a couple other episodes I just want to mention, like the Juan Pablo Lorenas episode about Sistema B. That was pretty interesting just to get that whole background.
Backstory, yeah.
Yeah. And then Marcel Fukuyama, he was leading B Lab Brazil and is pretty involved in Sistema B. Interestingly, the 6th place one is the circularity lessons from Patagonia and upcycled foods. I guess not that interestingly. If you put Patagonia in the name, people will click on it.
Ooh, I really liked the cancel culture with Jenny Morgan. Yeah, I'm just like such a fan of like, yeah, again, this movement requires so much nuance and we have to often hold more than one truth at a time. And I think that Jenny Morgan's sort of like high level overview is a really helpful and applicable way to think about that.
Yeah. And then impactful or controversial. I mean, the Nespresso one was controversial. I got some
very passionate responses.
Yeah, very pointed and passionate responses about why giving them a platform and letting Lucy speak about B Corp was not helpful.
Yeah.
Which I get. I think we had we tried as well as possible to preempt that by saying like, here's why we're doing it. This is, we want to give them a chance. And actually, there was only a couple of those. I did speak with those folks one-on-one. And actually, it was really helpful to just get the feedback and get people's insights and where they're coming from. And so we love the pushback.
Yes. It is very much a reflection of the many different kinds of people that are in our community. And it's like, it's not going to go away. Since Nespresso has certified, there have been a few other controversial additions to the B Corp community. And I don't think that the movement is like very significantly moving in a different direction. And so this feedback is important. And also, like, again, I still think that this is the best tool that we have to mitigate the extractive aspects of capitalism.
Well, what if we shifted? I mean, one thing before we shift too much off of Beyond the B and shift into more broader B Corp movement discussions, I did just want to give folks some teasers into next year. We're probably going to be doing a series on embodying B Corp certification. So, we've talked about it on and off for the last few months about not just certifying, but really living and embodying B Corp. And we're going to start a series where we interview different B Corp leaders about embodiment and how they not just get certified, but sort of live it in all parts of their company, because you can really feel it. But when a company is just certified versus certified and really living it day to day. And so that's just one teaser for the audience. Any other content teasers, Emmy?
Just a lot more new standards content. As we see the standards get applied, I think we will have some really interesting insights from folks across the community. And then I think also I'm really hoping some like collaborative and like co-created, I should say, tools end up manifesting and getting sort of like shared around. And I'm hoping that we can highlight some of those solutions and strategies for fulfilling the new standards requirements.
Yeah. And I guess one other teaser as well is I'm going to be starting to work on the third edition of the B Corp Handbook in 2026. And we may have some podcasts where, it'll be like interviewing people and then potentially asking their advice on what they think should be part of the new handbook. And if you are a listener who is, passionate about, if you write a new version of the B Corp Handbook, it has to include this, then please write us at beyond@lifteconomy.com, because, it's just starting this process and want it to be, representative of the whole community. And so, that's another teaser for folks.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go into some of these other questions. What is one thing you believed about B Corp or the movement that you no longer believe now?
Ooh, that's a fun one. I think this year we started out, or at least I personally started out, very uncertain about whether the new standards were achievable for a majority of the community. And I started this year just like very stressed out. And also I felt like I just was like feeling around in the dark. But I think the publication of the finalized version of the version 2.1 standards sort of like was I think maybe the first real time we saw the sort of year 0, year 3, year 5 delineations and distinctions. And that's sort of when like sort of the wheels started turning again. And I was like, okay, I think we can do this. Like, you have to really want it. You can't just slide in there. But the new standards were feeling really scary and not doable. But now at this stage, and especially having been digging through the new standards, both with clients and then also just like for funsies, I think that we are in a pretty good place if you really want it.
Yeah.
How about you?
It'd be interesting to wager guesses on the percentage of community that will make it through right into the...
Yeah, everybody can make it. Everybody can, and everybody should try. But yeah, they're still it's a pretty high bar still.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually was thinking about this, taking a new standards, thought process for a moment. People have said the new standards are a pain, or well, no one said new standards are a pain. They often say like, I don't know how we're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, when I look through some of them, it's actually less administrative burden than version 1.6. Like you do not have to do as many documents and templates and like things as you do in 1.6 in the new standards. And so I think there is a lot of frustration and, what do they say? Teeth gnashing? Is it teeth gnashing?
That sounds right. I'm terrible at idioms.
Gnashing teeth around like how hard the new standards are. And the more I've looked through them, I was like, these could be easier in some ways. They're not going to be easier in all ways. They will be more hard and more difficult in some ways. But the admin burden of like this policy, the local purchasing policy, the human rights. There is a human rights policy, but like all the policies in version 1.6, we literally have a folder on our drive of like 50 templates from version 1.6.
Mm-hmm.
And my sense is that it's nowhere near that many on the new standards. It's not to say there's zero, but it's not going to be a ton. And of course, it depends on your track and size of your company. But I actually, the more I think about it, I was like, this could be easier in some ways. So I'm throwing out, this is a very counter take to all the takes of it's going to be way harder.
I would be remiss if I missed my opportunity to once again encourage everyone to look at their B Impact platform, please. Please just open up your version, because if you go into your account on the B Impact platform, it shows you your year zero requirements for your entity. And that's like assuming the last track, like factors. So, it's like the size of company and the industry and the sector and all that jazz. But I think it's a really good place to start if you're feeling overwhelmed by the new standards, because it's just like there's way fewer things to look at and review.
Yeah. I think landing the plane. So if you imagine version 2.1, the new standards being a giant, like huge airplane that needs to come in and land, I was like thinking like there's so many ways that this could get gusted wind off into the bay and end up strewn about on a mountain. And we're not completely clear, but I do think B Lab is like touched the runway and like bounced back up, and then like it's like bouncing and like swerving side to side, but like the plane is like being landed in this metaphor.
I am cracking up over here. This metaphor, it feels extremely accurate. And also the amount of times like being inside B Lab and also outside B Lab and being like, we're building the plane as we fly it. Literally, I'm just like, well, I can see it so clearly now. Yeah, we have touched the runway.
It's like there's 500 people in the cockpit and 10,000 people in the airplane. And it's just this huge airplane that's just trying to land. And they're like, oh, we got it, everybody. And everyone in the back's like, oh, shit. There's some people who are like, everyone stay calm. Other people are just screaming and throwing their high heels, and, other people throwing their Doc Martens across the airplane. But yeah, so we haven't arrived at the terminal yet, but we've been bouncing and slowing down the momentum, landing the plane.
And, this is also the opportunity to be like, B Corp is a journey as it ever was. We're never getting to the destination. This is a culture of continuous improvement, always and forever. But yes, if the airplane is the new standard, then we have been doing this for like 5 years now, and we are all very grateful to at least see the ground and the runway.
Bounce off it.
Yeah. And like, get out of the way, geese. Get out of the way.
Yeah, there's geese getting scared out of the runway.
I have to bring it back to birds all the time, no matter what.
Yeah.
As we look forward, 2026 and beyond, what would success for the movement look like? For 1 year, 5 year, 10 years from now, sort of beyond metrics, growth, like specific, or like a certain number of certified companies, like what do you envision here?
I think Kevin from our team at Lift Economy has said a lot, like, every company should be a B Corp. It should be like the off-the-shelf benefit, at least a benefit corp legal structure, right? Like it should be how you start a corporation. I think the UK Better Business Act, I'm not actually sure what the latest status on that is, but that was probably the first, or maybe the most well-known to me example of like trying to make that actually a movement across, not, in the US, it's more of a voluntary, like you have to go to a state that has the benefit corp law and then incorporate. But in the UK, I believe it was like, no, every business should do this way. That would be huge. So success, I think, would be having that integrated into all companies. I do think, the numbers or growth is less important than the, B Lab, and particularly in some of the earlier days with Jay, Bart, and Andrew, were pretty good at, probably from Jay's like marketing brain from And1, and like how do you create viral things, not really like YouTube viral, but more of like just really thoughtful, clever marketing campaigns that make the community punch above its weight. And I feel like, so like the number of B Corps or success, or like the number is less important than the B Corp community is like influencing large companies and large, for example, the trillions and trillions of dollars in the retirement funds, the sort of like the way companies operate. Like if there's the B Corp community that can continue to put positive pressure on like moving that capital towards positive impact, that would be hugely successful. And I'm not sure the scale of the amount of B Corps we would need to do that, but that would be successful. What about you, Emmy?
Like, those retirement dollars, those procurement, supply chain dollars, like the, creating great places to work, like more and more good jobs. There's like this upward pressure that B Corps are creating. When I think of the B Corp movement many years from now, and maybe very definitively after our first full year 5 audits cycle, I see some really interesting opportunities to measure impact across all different kinds of companies, all different sizes, sectors. There's just like with the version 2.1, there's just like a standardization to what we're trying to get companies to measure that can like, I think can manifest in such huge ways for, again, like putting real numbers and like data to that upward pressure. I think too, the new standards, especially for larger companies, require a lot of transparency. And I think transparency is something really key we've been missing in the business community, especially American, where, we're publishing our tax strategies and some financial statements and like all this interesting stuff that like, this is really where the rubber meets the road. And we can show folks literally like demonstrate very clearly how to run a socially and environmentally impactful business, so that either you're encouraging other companies, you're like giving them a playbook to do it like that, or you're encouraging new companies to start with that in mind. So I don't know. I'm excited about the future of the movement. We're still in this like period where things are very logistically difficult and challenging as we transition from 1.6 to 2.1, and there's still a lot of uncertainty, but I can see really clearly a future where the meaning of B Corp is really clear, and it means that it signifies like what businesses could be and sort of role models in the business community.
I love it. It's a great place to wrap it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Emmy, for being on this journey with me for 18 months.
Isn't that wild? Like at the top of the episode, I was like, oh, this is our first year, but this is our first full year of the podcast. And I probably don't say it enough, so I will say on the podcast here that Ryan really just carries this podcast. He's doing all the logistics and the planning, and there's like all these technical stuff that goes behind the scenes, whether it's setting us up for success to record or making sure in post-production that things are going how they should be and that they get posted on time. And yeah, Ryan is the real MVP of Beyond the Bee, and I really appreciate everything that he does for the podcast, also the community, and also us at Lift Economy. Yeah, I very much appreciate co-hosting with you.
Yeah, thank you, Emmy. And I do get a lot of feedback saying, I really like listening to Emmy on the podcast. So
people are like, your voice is so soothing. Like,
yeah.
It's me
Silky
trying
good
to calm
podcast
myself down.
Yes.
Love.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone. And yes, our, renewed request to, so if you have feedback or ideas for the third edition of the B Corp handbook, please send them to Beyond the Bee or beyond@lifteconomy.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So
yes, please.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, y'all.
Hey, Beyond the Bee listeners. If you're looking for even more inspiring conversations with leaders on the front lines of our movement towards just futures, be sure to subscribe to Next Economy Now, produced by the team at Lift Economy. Next Economy Now broadens the focus beyond the B Corp movement to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, democratic, equitable, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy. Check out our latest episodes at lifteconomy.com/podcast. You can subscribe to Next Economy Now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.